Well, it's definitely. I want to talk about a new tone for a second, if that's all right. So,
Yeah, fuck.
D-Ray, you're quoted in that Brooklyn vegan article. You're saying that new tone means calling out racial injustice. Calling out racial injustice has been a kind of like a central part of like ska, reggae, and punk rock music for the most part. But we all know like kind of like that message sort of kind of gets diluted a little more than frequently when we run into people who lean on the whole like, oh, let's keep politics out of ska, let's keep politics out of punk, like, you know, that whole like ideology. And I kind of wanted to ask like what your guys' opinion is on that type of like compartmentalization that sometimes goes on, particularly in like the American ska scene. You know, I'm not saying that international ska scenes don't do that as well, but more often than not, most international ska scenes kind of like stick to that. Like for example, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of a Venezuelan band called Desorden Público, but they have a song called El Racismo es una enfermedad, which literally means racism is a disease. And you know they play that, and that song is a cumbia song. It's not even like a ska song. So like, could you guys speak on like the how do I say this? The frequent moments where there's kind of backlash from, you know, sometimes in the American ska scene mostly, where you'll see fans kind of trying to block that stuff out when at its core that's what this music is about.
I mean, I think D-Ray should talk first because I mean,
I'll do it. Yeah, I feel like
yeah.
I feel like we all have a lot to like speak on about this. We're like chopping at the bit. Like, did we? I mean, like,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
You're right. You're right. Like when fans or bands want to come out and say like, keep that out of ska or punk or whatever, keep that out of whatever. Like, you're not educated or your mind's not in the right space. Not just with ska, but with like history. Like, if you want to keep racism out of anything, then then you're kind of saying that I'm okay with racism. Like, if you don't want to have this conversation, we're not gonna fix racism in a day. We need to have these conversations and normalize talking about the things that the racism that's both blatant and the racism that's systematic that we do on a daily basis without even thinking about it. And if you're gonna be in a band and you don't have to use your platform to like be super outspoken about it, but if somebody wants to talk about it, your reaction shouldn't be, whoa. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about that. Like, so, you know, like I'll let somebody else kind of breathe some air into that.
I just love what Greg, we would always have these conversations about how ska started, you know, and ska like is a music for people. I think that's like a beautiful element of what Bad Operation is and what Community Records is.
Yeah,
is that it's really like it's like a service entity kind of. That's kind of the goal, right? I mean, it's called Community Records, and so it needs to be at the serve people. It needs to like work to the benefit of people, right? And so, I mean, Greg would tell me about how the origins of ska were in this revolutionary work. You know, this work that workers were doing. This stuff is still happening in New Orleans. I'm engaged with it like on a weekly basis, and so I mean, yeah, Greg would always break that down to me. He's a ska historian, you know.
I don't know about historian, but I do. I mean, to vibe off of that, like ska, in my opinion, became irrelevant because it wasn't talking about politics. Absolutely. You know, I mean, like in the 90s, you know, and given there are many examples of, I mean, Mike Park, Asian Man Records, like so many of the bands around there, like Fishbone, you know, I mean, like there's a lot of bands that were very active, but the ones that were at the forefront, most of them were not really talking about it. I mean, the Mighty Mighty Bosstones had some elements of it for sure, but like that was people were showing up. And as far as I'm concerned, like if people are going to show up for us, or if we're going to show up for them, like that's going to be in the orbit. It's going to be part of our motivation. Are we trying to be, Dominic has used this word, like, I don't want to be didactic. I don't want to pretend like we have something to teach, you know, it's not about that, but like ska music needs to, and it's not just racial injustice. It's like, there's so many forms of oppression in our, especially, I mean, I can only speak from American society and what I see, but I mean, it's rampant. I mean, and, you know, white supremacy, patriarchy, all the elements that go along with those ideas and more, like that's the shit that ska needs to be talking about. And in my opinion, in our opinion, like none is about that. And it's not just a sound, like it's not our sound, like, you know, Ska Tune Network, like all the bands with Bad Time, like bands that have been like hustling before we were showing up, like, you know, anyway, yeah, that's, I could go on and on.
It's also important. I'm so glad you said that in the Brooklyn Vegan article, D-Ray, because I think it's really important. And punk scenes, we be clear about what our politics are, because if this wants to be a revolutionary music, we have to be clear, because I've seen, like we see in punk music, but like in culture, how ideas can be co-opted and turn into something that we never knew it was before. So I'm really grateful that D-Ray was like, yo, no, this is what it is.
Well, yeah, like off the top, yeah, I know, like we just gotta let people know like what the deal is, because with music, anybody can listen to your music and turn it into like whatever they want. But you know, and also Greg had the point of like, if we don't set this out there, if we start using the new tone thing and we don't put it out there at least a little bit what it means for us, it's not what it means for everybody, but where we're coming from, then someone else is going to set that definition for us. And
kids that look, I stopped playing ska music partly because I didn't like the direction it was going, and I thought just the style of it was kind of played out in the kind of mid 2000s. But kids that looked like me celebrating a music that its inception was about people that didn't look like me coming together to play music and celebrate music, and like a community not understanding that inception of like what that music is about. I saw that like as a real problem. Like people celebrating that music that looked like me, not understanding that it wasn't about it was music created by people that didn't look like them, you know?
Right.
And I think that like not understanding that and not like thinking about that as like a reason to support it or a reason to really celebrate in it, you know, it just seemed really confusing to me. And it seemed like I was bringing my voice to a place that I didn't fully understand. Like I didn't understand it, you know, and so I didn't see myself as being a person that should represent it because I wasn't a part of it in that kind of way. Go ahead. Yeah,
to that point, you know, if you check out the great Nicholas Payton, he'll talk about Black American music. In my opinion, I mean, and I think this is like so much music that we love comes from Black American culture. So, and of course, I mean, it even Scott traveled from New Orleans over the airwaves to Jamaica. You know, they were listening to New Orleans Black
R&B,
New Orleans R&B, right? So, you know, I think it's important. I mean, this is like the roots of this music are Black music. This is Black music. So how can we divorce that reality from this music? Then, what do you even make, like, how do you call that ska anymore even?
To kind of second that, like, more often than not, even like, to kind of make the point that Rob was making, I think sometimes even, and it's unfortunate to say this, and definitely not to name any names because I won't, but even like a lot of like well-known established bands for sure miss that point. Because I was watching a movie recently when they were talking about kind of like the tensions between the more traditional ska bands of back in the day and the third wave bands got really popular in the 90s. A certain front person was talking about, our thing is just kind of having fun and being together with your friends. And I just don't understand where the negativity towards us comes from. But it's kind of like the kind of what I've always thought was, when you start kind of just, it sucks to say this, but kind of just ignorantly making music about, living in some type of bubble and not recognizing what's actually going on around you, like outside. That's when it starts to become a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's privilege too. It's privilege. It's like you don't even have to be aware of where this music comes from. You can grab whatever you want, make it your own, and like don't have to like answer to anybody, or you can just whatever.
Yeah.
And you feel the pain of the people in the streets.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that and like focusing on that, because it's something that's very important to all of us, and like community building and being active in our communities and fighting for, justice for all people. And
yeah, most definitely. I mean, are you guys, I know you guys sort of kind of mentioned it, but have you guys been involved in the local politics over there in New Orleans for a while, or was it something that you guys?
I recently started this thing called Musicians Alliance, which is, since musicians don't get paid well here, right? There's a lot of musicians who play on Frenchman Street for 4 hours and make like $50. It's awful. And it was only going to get worse once the pandemic started. And so there became a need for musicians to organize. And so we started the Musicians Alliance. We have meetings every week and our fight is to be a unified voice for New Orleans musicians and achieve a living wage for those musicians, right? And so rather than allowing people with business interest to advocate on behalf of musicians are advocating on their own behalf, right? And once I got into that, it kind of like opened up this whole world of work and organizing, like with the People's Assembly and other workers groups in the city. But I think also a lot of the work that Community Records did from the jump with having those all ages shows was important community building work as well. Even though, even though it wasn't like always, it wasn't about protesting or anything, but building that community for young people to experience live music, that was so important for me,
Yeah,
You guys have been involved with that.
I was like, I don't want to, claim receipts or like call a track record of political engagement or even current political engagement. But I think that, we certainly try to do what we can to keep our eyes open, keep our ears open. I think that this year has cracked the fucking egg open and all of us are much more like on our toes and trying to be on it as best we can. And I don't think by any means any single person in this band is like a perfect like person, but it's not about that. It's about us like trying to find ways to engage with our local community. Like we've been involved with numerous organizations in terms of like contributing where we can and showing up to events and protests and it's go ahead, dear.
It's never going to be perfect. Like perfectionism is not an achievable goal. Like the idea is that this is a lifelong battle and like we're going to be learning new ways to engage and that's going to change just with, the weather, and we have to be committed to those changes and the goal, of building a better community, society, whether that's like your neighborhood or your state or whatever. Like it's something that we have to continually be engaged in with like local politics and like, and like those all ages shows, like Dominic, you're right. Like engaging like young kids who have nowhere to go and nothing to do and giving them an outlet. And like, it's the same thing with like funding schools. It's positive reinforcement for people that isn't like a carceral system or, I don't know. We're getting kind of.
I've worked in the public education system here in New Orleans since 2014, and I used to teach high school, and I work at the community college here, and it's the same thing. Like whether you're on the streets or whether you're in the classroom, finding ways to contribute. You have to know your part in that and what you're comfortable with, and continue to move down that path. I'm looking at a little thing on Greg's wall right now. You owe it to us all to get on with what you're good at. And I think that quote's like super important in a lot of ways, whether you're playing music or whether you're in your career fighting for social justice, however you want to think about it.
Yeah, there it is.
And Greg put ska.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Is Scott on there?
He read it.